10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey everyone, welcome to Women in Sports. Happy New Year. Super excited to be back and interviewing some crazy, incredible women taking over all things sports. Just a little background, this show is about advancing the narrative for women in sports by highlighting the impacts the sports have had on their lives growing up, how they're impacting their lives now, what they're doing in the industry, and bringing awareness to all the different spaces women are in throughout the industry. This is a Rising Coaches sponsored production. For more information on Rising Coaches, go to risingcoaches.com. Also, be sure to check out the Women in Sports podcast. We are up and live and recording all great content for just all these incredible women in the sports industry, available on all podcast platforms. But now for the most important part and why everyone is tuning in tonight, I want to introduce my guest. She does it all. She's a former player, coach. She is now a founder and owner of a company called Go Global Recruiting, as well as an NCAA and WNBA analyst. She took a break from some breaking news tonight, lots of trades and things happening in the WNBA sports world. Rachel Galligan, thank you for being on and joining us tonight. How are you?
Awesome. Well, first off, I thank you for having me on. This whole platform and everything you guys are doing is incredible. Just even the countdown. I was like, I got to step my game up with my own stuff. This is incredible. So no, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to just kind of talk about my journey and career and just chit chat a little bit. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. In a journey, like the reason behind the scenes stuff that I kind of so excited to interview. Really, able to really so many things. I'm so excited to get started. But one thing that I do really kind of love hitting off is just kind of like sports in general. Obviously, not obviously, but you played basketball growing up. You went to Eastern Illinois and played collegiately. You had like a super amazing career. Not going to shortchange you at all on that one. But what kind of role did sports, like specifically basketball, kind of have in your life while you were growing up?
I mean, what role didn't it have? Basketball is my first love. I started from a very young age, and I have to give credit to my father for that. He was a tremendous basketball player and started me young on the little Fisher Price basket that I think a lot of people had, and I just fell in love with it, and it was something I was deeply passionate about from a very young age, and I am now. In every avenue in which I've been able to explore it, from a player to a coach to the different things I do now, it's been really fun to look at it through so many different lenses, and to continue to push myself through it and learn and network. I mean, everything good that has come into my life has really come through the avenue of basketball, whether it's friends and experiences, traveling the world. My personal growth is through this wonderful game. So everything that I do now is just really surrounded by it, and it's all because of this deep love I have for the game.
Yeah, crazy what a little orange ball can do for us.
Yeah.
We're the next level in playing college.
You cut out there for a second, so I apologize. But I think you were asking the next level. I was able to go and play at Eastern Illinois University, which was a really great experience. I wasn't highly recruited. I did not play on the biggest AAU team at the time. I am from a fairly small town in central Illinois, and I had some letdowns through my recruiting process. There were places I wanted to go and places that I had my hopes set on, and it didn't work out that way. It worked out the way it was supposed to, which was this small Division I school in the Ohio Valley Conference, and went there had a phenomenal experience. I was recruited by my mentor, Brady Sally. He's currently the head coach at Ball State University, and he pushed me to a limit that I had never been pushed before. And so much of the things I learned from him, I guess really what I'm trying to say, he made me a player that I probably didn't necessarily know that I could become. And that was a really great experience. And I had some of the best teammates that are still some of my best friends. We were able to really turn a program that was really struggling around to a successful program. And I think peaked from my basketball skill standpoint just because of the coaching I had. I had some phenomenal coaches that knew how to get me to respond. And that was great. I wouldn't change anything about, just my high school and my college career.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think it's cool to be able to look back and be super excited about your journey and what has come of it and the coaches that have been able to really push you. Was it kind of too in high school or in college, like was it always a dream for you to go play professionally? Or was that kind of something that developed from those coaches you had in college that really pushed you outside of your comfort zone?
I don't know that I ever really thought about it. I just was waiting for the next game. And as it got into my junior year, I remember my coach pulled me in the office and he's like, you need to start thinking about the next steps of your career. And I was like, really? And that meant thinking about going overseas. I knew that I was never going to make the WNBA. I'm a 6'2" center. So in center terms in women, that's kind of undersized. So I knew that meant overseas. And so I kind of had to work on that mentality of, well, what does this mean in terms of my training and my development for the next year and a half? And so I wanted to. Of course I wanted to play. I wanted to play as long as I could. And I got to play in Spain professionally, which is a country that I'm deeply connected with still. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. It was very short-lived. There's big differences of playing overseas versus playing collegiately. And I thought about continuing it. I thought about coming back to the States and trying to get into my coaching profession. And really in the midst of that, I guess, decision in my mind, it was made for me when I got offered an assistant coaching position. But once I knew that it was a possibility that I could play professionally overseas, I wanted to try it. I wasn't fully comfortable with the idea, but I knew, give it a shot, get out of your comfort zone and you can at least say that you've experienced this.
And I think it's something like more and more today that coaches in college especially are really like pushing their players to think like, go play professionally, like you're young. And I think too, even to the point of like women that are ready to like be nurses or be doctors or go on to that next level too, they're really preparing them and challenging them of like, this is going to be the rest of your life. Like you're going to really learn who you are in these 4 or 5 years. And so I think that's awesome that you got to experience that, especially kind of going to a mid-major and your coaches were super realistic with you, but also like push the envelope. And you kind of alluded to it, but like you got an assistant coaching offer and that was at the school that you played at. Can you just kind of like tell me, how did that kind of start? Did you ever really see yourself going into the coaching profession and how'd that all kind of work out as you were in Spain?
I did. I probably thought about coaching before I thought about playing professional. I didn't, and then I kind of retract on it. I was like, maybe I don't want to do that. But it definitely went through my mind several times during my collegiate career. It's a really crazy story. To be able to be a Division I assistant coach at 21 years old is almost unheard of, and unfortunately, I had an assistant coach. Her name was Jackie Moore. She passed away the year I was in Spain, and she had coached me through my career. Really young, really tragic story of a woman who was so promising in the coaching profession and really pushed us to our limit. I learned so much from Jackie. So Brady kept that position open for the rest of that year. He did not fill that immediately. And so when I had come back from Spain and I was just kind of trying to figure out where my life was going to go, he approached me and was like, "Hey, do you want to come back?" I didn't think about it at all. It was an immediate yes. And it was an honor to be able to fill her role. And the way that kind of worked out was really special to me, but also just to be able to go back to my alma mater. I mean, this is a school that you've given your heart to for so long. And to be able to learn under him now as an assistant, I knew this was the right move. I didn't really think twice about it. It was a no-brainer. So I hung him up from a professional standpoint, and then I just became an all-time practice player coach with my old team. Yeah.
Best of both worlds on that one. Your coach was like, "All right, I know what I'm doing. This is gonna be great. She knows our system, everything."
Yep.
But yeah, even like kind of going off of that, like what did you really kind of take with you from your playing career of like, hey, this is like how I felt super like pushed by my coaches, and I would want to do that for players. And this is where like, you know, that coach really knew my boundary and really helped me, you know, I trusted them and stuff like that. Was there any real advice that you kind of were starting to prepare yourself to then step into basically on campus and be a coach?
I think it started with me with, well, I mean, I learned a lot from Jackie. I remember telling myself, like, what would Jackie do? You know? And she was so on top of it. She was so organized. So at that level, we didn't have a dobo. I was a third assistant. So you're running around doing everything. And then we had an assistant who was out on a maternity leave. So I was really running around like crazy, just thrown into the fire. And the first thing I took was just the relationship with the players, and how much they have to understand how much you care about them. And that was instilled in me through my coaches. I really felt that, and I really responded through that. And also just the notion of, you know, every player has to be coached differently. You have to truly know who you're working with. You have to know these players. You have to understand them. You have to understand how to get them, what brings out the best in them. And that's not an across the blanket, you know, answer. So I knew that as a player, you know, that I responded to things differently than my teammate would. So I really approached it in that light of understanding my players in that light, understanding that they needed to feel certain things from me, that I wanted them to have that open door policy where they could come talk to me. Hey, I've been in your shoes. I've done it. I know he's really tough. I know it sucks. Today is the worst day and you just want to cry. Come in here, let me put my arms around you. We'll talk about it. And then just approaching it as a sponge. I just was taking on every ounce of what I was learning constantly, every single day, just like I did as a player.
Yeah, so many good things in like just in that answer. Basically something that I do like just think about is you had only been like a year removed from your playing career and like from being, so like you were on the team like with those girls. So talking about like knowing them as like on a very personal level, like my teammates, like I thankfully was blessed with like, you know, I got to go to 2 different schools and all those girls, like we went to war together. And I still like am super close with a lot of them today. So what kind of like, what situation did you kind of have with establishing yourself, like going from that former player into that coaching role of, you know, there were kind of boundaries and things like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, my class was really top heavy. There was 5 of us. And then the class below me had, I believe it was 6. So we were gone. And then the class below me was gone by the time I had rejoined the team. So I think there were only 2 or 3 girls on the team at that point that I had played with, and they were great. Everyone was super professional about it. I knew immediately that my role is different. You know, we have a working relationship, and we can't be doing the things we were doing a few years ago, hanging out and doing all that sort of stuff in the ways that we were, but it wasn't an issue for us. I think everyone handled it phenomenally. And I had a really good transition because there was just a couple girls and they immediately accepted me as their coach. And I never pushed the limit in terms of acting like I was this know-it-all assistant, trying to tell them what to do. So it was a very seamless thing and honestly really easy. I honestly haven't thought much about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I feel like I would have loved to have my former teammates be my coaches, just because of like that level of respect and two, just, yeah, really understanding, being able to, I think more just know what they were going through, and being like, yes, like we want to cry, like we've cried together doing this, like knowing that. But then there's also like for you, the flip side of things of, did you have any idea kind of what your coaches did and what really went into, planning your practices and game days and all of the ins and outs of, because I always hear from coaches, like, I swear my players think we just show up for practice and show up for games and that's about it. But like kind of what was, what about being an assistant coach and like a new young assistant coach was kind of like that most rewarding and challenging and surprising thing?
You take for granted when you're playing a college sport how easy you have it. Those were fun times, and food was there, and your schedule was there, and you show up to practice, you do your homework, you take naps. College was fun. College was great. You don't realize what your coaches are doing to help prepare your team to be successful day in and day out. So it was definitely a shock. I think the thing that I took to the most was the recruiting aspect of it, which I deeply love. But I'm also what's the right word? I'm a very OCD, in some ways high-strung person at times. So the rat race of it, again, we were down a coach. So
yeah,
the rat race of running around and figuring out the travel plans and the meals and the recruiting and going out on the road and recruiting for the first time and in-game responsibilities. It was so fast that it was just like I just dove in. I didn't even have time to react, but I knew there were so many jobs to do and a lot fell on me. And honestly, it was the best way to learn. I had to figure it out. And like I said, it happened really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Now reflecting on it, yeah, you realize, especially when you don't have as many resources as a lot of the big programs have, that as an assistant, you have to pick up different roles here and there. You have to be willing to do anything from scrubbing the floor to, talking your coach off the ledge after a tough loss. You have to be prepared for it all. And that year was very eye-opening, but probably one of the biggest years of growth I've ever had.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like what every like young first coach is like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, just get thrown in there like that. And I feel like it's never as easy as what you think and stuff like that. But yeah, so then kind of from there, you had like a few different stops, kind of kept coaching and stuff like that. How did you really navigate, like applying for new jobs, looking at different schools, and then ultimately kind of like what influenced that?
Yeah, it was really tough. I was hitting a point where I was starting to have other schools contact me, which was really nice to feel like you were kind of being sought after, like you would build a really good reputation as an assistant. And I turned a couple of them down, and they were bigger jobs. And I felt a serious amount of loyalty to Brady and the program we had built. A lot of the players that I had recruited to come in. By this time, we were at Ball State. When Brady took the job at Ball State, he wanted me to go with him. And by this point, the players that I had been able to recruit, you build such a connection with them. That's one of the hardest things to do is to leave that. Or to say, hey, I'm out. But, anyone will tell you, like, you can't stay for the players. You have to make these decisions for you, and you have to, try to position yourself for your hopes and your dreams and all that sort of stuff. And so it was I'd be lying if I said that it was easy. Still, one of the toughest decisions I ever made in my life was to walk into his office and say, I don't know if I should keep doing this. I still miss coaching. I regardless of everything that I do right now and I'm learning to do, I'll always consider myself a coach first. And it very well could be in my future. I did it for 8 years at a few different levels. And so at my core, that's who I am. But I also know there's a lot of other things that I can do too. And so at that time, I had been really intrigued with the international recruiting aspect of it. I'd spent a ton of time doing it, and I loved it, and I saw a need for it, and I wanted to continue to grow in that realm, but I still didn't really have a ton of direction. So when I stepped away, I knew I kind of needed to spread my wings. I needed to leave Brady. We had been together for a long time as a player and as an assistant. It was time for that next chapter. It just took me a minute to figure out what that next chapter was. And had an opportunity to coach at a different program at Grand Canyon University. That was a really unique experience just for one season. And then I was involved at the NAIA level, which a lot of people don't know about, but that was really good for me to just learn a completely different governing body of sport. So kind of bounced around, tried to figure out what I was going to do. And during that time, I knew I wanted to kind of start my own business. But it was hard. It was a hard few years of figuring out my identity and figuring out my place, stepping away from really a great job and a great career, and just kind of allowing myself to free fall and figure it out as I did was extremely challenging. But yeah, it's worked itself out.
Yeah, seriously. I feel like we are just at the tip of the iceberg when it just comes to your life and your journey and things like that. But I love that how you said like you're always going to be a coach at heart. I feel like coaching and in that profession, and it's just a hustle, it's a grind, and not everyone can do it. But you always have it in your heart and stuff like that. And so kind of like ultimately you did decide to step away from coaching, which like I commend you for sure, because it is super hard. It's like you hung up your shoes, but then it's like you really hung up your whistle and all of that. How did you really make the jump from coaching and then starting your recruiting company, and then also too like getting involved in being an analyst for the NCAA and WNBA? Like what kind of was the timeline on those?
It was probably 3 years. When I left Grand Canyon, I was at the NAIA, which the rules at the NAIA allow you to be a lot more flexible in terms of the other things you're involved with. So while still coaching, I was still holding on, I was working on my business. I was working with a couple recruiting businesses before I started my business. So I had gotten now into this recruiting service world, where you're learning from a couple different companies how they run their business and just the mentality behind it, and kind of grinding from that aspect, which was good for me. And I had to learn under some of those individuals before, honestly, I had enough courage to go start my own thing. And I remember one day when I was an assistant at Eastern, I just said, one day I am going to start my own recruiting service. And that always kept replaying in my mind. And I remember at this time, I mean, I'm not making anything. I'm in Arizona, and I'm just like on this island, like what is going on? What direction do I go with this? And I wasn't necessarily lining up, what's the right word? Like morally, or then maybe that's a little too harsh, but my ideals of how to run a recruiting service were not lining up with some of the individuals I was working with. And I just thought, why just do your own thing? Like, what are you so afraid of? And I had a lot of great people around me that supported me in that. I had at this point had a lot of former players that had known I wanted to do something like this and really encouraged me to do something like this. But ultimately I had to, unfortunately, I had to work with and around just some very odd people to make me realize, like, I just need to do my own thing. And like, why not me? And get that confidence and that courage to just dive in and start a business and learn what that means as you go, and become your own boss. That in itself was a whole other animal for me to tackle, because at this point I was always so accustomed to working under someone else, right? I was a great assistant coach. I was extremely loyal to someone else. You tell me what to do, I'll do it to the best of my ability. So to step into that role of me being the expert, me calling the shots, me being the one that's going to build this thing from the ground up, was overwhelming for me, but I did it. And I knew that was something that deep down I always wanted to do. And I never, ever looked back. And I never have.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, like being a recruiting coordinator, like it is the ultimate, like I respect all coaches, but like if you're like, oh, I'm a Division I recruiting coordinator, like it's just like insane. Like I remember my summers of like playing the games, and then it's like that was fun for me, but then watching coaches sit there and like having to watch all these games, having to watch all of these players and things like that. One thing that I have so much respect for, definitely like with recruiting and having like these recruiting services is, and this is because my roommate in college, she is from Australia. And so her being an international student, she was on our women's soccer team. And so I didn't really get to play a lot on the teams that I was on with international students, but being able to like experience like, you know, one of my best friends in college, being from a different country and everything that she, you know, gets to experience and how just thankful. Obviously everyone is thankful to have a scholarship, play a sport in college. But as in America, what a lot of people don't realize is like, we're the only, you know, country that really you can get an education, like a higher education and play a sport. And I remember like just learning all of that and obviously like getting to hang out with somebody with a cool accent was super dope. So we always like, people always stop. We couldn't go anywhere like in public. They'd be like, where are you from? Like we were in Buffalo. They were like, you are lost. But how kind of did that really like, was your heart kind of like, you know, international students and working with overseas? Was that something that you were able to really get into at different schools you worked for? Or was it something that, you know, because I do feel like some coaches are like, their heart is just, hey, we want international students. You see a lot of it kind of at those higher levels. But where did that really come into play and kind of be your niche in your company?
Well, right when I had started at Eastern, when I had first gotten there, Brady called me in the office. He goes, hey, I want you to be in charge of international recruiting. I was like, okay, you know, like, well, what does that mean? Like,
what is that? Yeah.
We're going to get you hooked up with this recruiting service and you're going to figure it out. And I was like, he goes, I want to recruit Europe. And at that time, it wasn't as prominent as you see now. It's really, I think in a lot of ways, gotten really popular to do the last probably 5-6 years. So at that time, that was my direction. So we had a service that had just kind of started at the time, and that kind of helped give me some direction. But ultimately, we were lucky enough to have a budget that would literally, I could go over there at least a couple times a year. So I started with researching, like, what do I go watch in Europe, you know, and it's the summertime when, you know, you're able to go out in July recruiting and you can watch a lot of international basketball at, you know, European championships. And I was always very focused on Europe. I don't have a ton of experience recruiting, you know, in Australia or anything like that. So it was always very European based. So I just started going over there, which was really cool for me because I had this very strong desire to want to travel the world. And I would do it completely solo. And I have some just absolute horror stories with it that are so funny. I love talking about and stuff, but just going over to European championships, you know, you can see a handful of teams competing at any time. And so I would just be really strategic. I'd go over there in the summertime. I'd watch as many teams as I could. I'd come back. And at that time, that's when everyone had Facebook. And I'd try and find them on Facebook and try and recruit them. And build relationships. And then I would go back in the fall and try to have like a home visit, and do a little bit more of a detailed visit with some of the players that I had really connected with. And so it started with that. And on top of recruiting domestically in the Midwest, which if anyone who knows recruiting in the Midwest, it's a monster in itself because there's just, it's so saturated with talent. So the recruiting was definitely my bread and butter. And then as we started to sign players and bring them over, just the relationships I built with them, the connection I built with them, and I could see the value in it, that we could get a player at Eastern Illinois or at Ball State that maybe we would never be able to get if, say, they were a player here in the States. So I could go find a game changer of a player who could come in, get a great degree. We had a great relationship, and they could help our team in a way that no one else could. Just from a skill and experience standpoint, I mean, we recruited some absolute studs. And one of them went on to be the all-time leading scorer at Ball State. She was from Sweden, Natalie Fontaine. She's still playing. Shout out, Nat. Sabina Orazova, she was from Slovakia, still playing, ended up being player of the year in the OVC. So it really started with like this core group of women that I'd had. And then I really wanted to get into Spain because Spain is such a talented country. And I signed a point guard named Carmen Grande, and have a great relationship with her. She had a phenomenal career over here. And through that, just talking with them, they just said, we don't have resources, like we don't have someone to go to where we can ask questions about what does it mean to be recruited? What are the different levels in NCAA college basketball? What does a scholarship mean? There's a lot of hidden fees and things that happen when you do come over here. So there wasn't a lot of support for the players over in other countries to just go talk to someone. And I really felt strongly that I wanted to be that. It's almost like being a big sister, or that assistant coach role, like where you can kind of wrap your arms around this player who has this dream, and you can kind of help talk them through that. What does that mean? And are you prepared for this? Because let's be honest, it's not for everybody, and we need to be real about what that means. And so it started with just really wanting to help the players as a resource, but then also helping the coaches identify talent, and being able to be someone that had been in their shoes. I've done it as an assistant. I've recruited. There's a lot of services that maybe they haven't coached college basketball. But I think a lot of people understand that I have, and they rely a lot on just my evaluation of players and just an honest perspective of that. And so it was both of those aspects. I wanted to just be that bridge to help create opportunity for great programs and for great players.
So much good stuff in all of that. Like, I feel like my mind is just blown. They're like, because even thinking about like you being a coach and like, those evaluations and those things. And I think too, where I kind of like want to ask is just like, how do you begin? Like the recruiting process in general is so like, it's so intimate. It's so, like parents are trusting their babies with, these people and stuff like that. But then doing it in a different country, not speaking the same language. How did you really just kind of, you get those girls to really trust you and even though you don't speak the same language and things like that, the whole beginning of the process kind of.
That's the part that it's just the recruiter in me. But the thing is what makes you a great recruiter is you're a genuine person who is honest, and you just communicate effectively. I genuinely have a passion for this game. I have a passion for young women to have the great experience that I had. Basketball and getting a scholarship and being able to play at that level will forever have changed my life. And as I watched other players from other countries get this opportunity that came from just complete different walks of life and the globe, and how it impacted them, and this incredible opportunity. I just wanted to do more of it. But you're right, like, connecting with players is not always easy, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I connect with everybody as a recruiter, or I connect with everybody just as a person, but I'm a relationship person. I love meeting people. I love getting to know people. I love asking questions. I love analyzing people. I think a big part of it was you have to go over there with a humble spirit and understand, like, you're not in America. You are in a different country. So how can I embrace this culture in a way to help me understand this family, this player, what her life has been like, to the best of my ability? Maybe even understand a couple little words or phrases here and there to just kind of show them how much you're trying, and how much you're interested, and how much you believe in them as a player, and kind of it's all relationship based, and at the core of it, I think that's what makes a really good recruiter. I think that's what makes a really good coach, is this is a relationship business. And if you try to fake it, they're going to know it. They're going to know it immediately. And they're definitely going to know it overseas, because they are, it's probably painting a pretty big brush, but broad brush, but very relationship driven, family driven. And thankfully I have that gift of being able to really just build solid relationships with people all over the world. And that's at the core of this, really why I love it.
Yeah, and why you're so good at it too. And then kind of on like the other end of that, just like with that push to kind of like bring international players, build those relationships, but then to get them connected to teams and coaches and so many different options and stuff in the US. What kind of like, is the importance for, or what you wish more coaches really knew about recruiting international players and using these agencies? And like, do you think it's something like most college coaches? I know you kind of said that there's been a lot more of a push for it. But I do think like a lot of teams and coaches, like, it's just very uncharted, and it has to be kind of budgeted. Like you like you said, you were flying overseas, you were going to Europe, pretty regularly. What kind of on the flip side does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to know who you are as a program, and I'll be the first one to tell a school if they call me, hey, we want to recruit overseas. Well, I'll ask them a few initial questions they don't know the answer to, which a lot of them haven't thought in that way. And we'll do our research, and I'll realize maybe you guys aren't really designed for this. Maybe your admission requirements are going to be extremely difficult, or have you thought of it this way? Every school is so different in terms of their admission, their international admission, the requirements. So that's the first thing I got to figure out. We can work around not having a budget to get over there and physically watch players play. I mean, gosh, look at us this past year. No one's been able to go anywhere to watch players play. But if your school doesn't really have the support to make these student athletes be successful academically, or even, from an admission standpoint, I think that's something we have to kind of identify first. Like, hey, is this place designed for it? And that's the first part. But I think the second part is, what, again, it goes back to you can't just bring over players from other countries and expect them to just conform directly to the way you have become accustomed to playing. The way they play overseas is vastly different than the way we've played here. Yes, basketball's evolving. We talk about positionless basketball all the time, and the fluidity and the motion of the game. And that's what makes European players very appealing right now, is just kind of the read and the speed of the game and those types of things. But it's like putting a square peg into a round hole. You're trying to get this type of player to fit into this type of system. Are you open to, maybe changing the way you play a little bit to help fit who this person is as a basketball player, and so those are the conversations you have too. And there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of questions that I'm asked, and but it's fun too, because I think the more we can educate, that those young assistant coaches who do want to recruit overseas, as to kind of what does that look like? What does that mean? Can I pass along some of the mistakes that I made as a young assistant to maybe another staff, that they won't have to make those same mistakes? Then that's invaluable. But it's a lot of learning. It's completely different than recruiting here in the States, and some like it, some don't. You have those who, look at South Florida. Their whole team is just chock full of a lot of internationals. They've done a phenomenal job, that system, and they're a lot of fun to watch. And you've seen it kind of at different levels. Like Georgia Tech is always a really big international school, because the school itself has some of the best resources for international players to get a great degree and to have the support academically that they need. So it's just been fun to help the assistants along the way, who are really interested in doing this.
Yeah, I know this wasn't like a sales pitch or anything, but for like all of the basketball coaches listening, please reach out to Rachel.
and I'm learning every year too. Please, I'm not sitting here saying I'm an expert, but I definitely, doing this for 12 years now, I've learned a lot, and that's a fun part of it too. It's always changing.
Yeah, seriously. And kind of with, the biggest change is just kind of like COVID-19, and how has that really impacted? I know you kind of said there has to be like positives and obviously negatives to it, but something where, all of this film, like no one is going out and recruiting right now. But how are you, like, as a recruiting agency and things like that, really like attacking COVID and the restrictions and things like that are coming with it right now?
It's hard because last summer I had plans to be in Europe for a month and a half, attending all the different championships and spending a significant amount of time meeting with some players and their families, and that's everything to me. So when COVID hit and I realized the events were canceled, it was kind of like, okay, well, how do we pivot through this? What does this look like? And ultimately, it kind of ended up being a blessing in disguise, because I had a really good base of players that I had seen the summer before and had been working with, and we were able to. Everyone's sitting at home, so we were able to, and that's including everyone in every other country. So we were all able to really meet. We did a ton of Zoom meetings. We did a lot of educational work. We got to really ask a lot of questions and get into some of these players' minds, and we got to meet with families and explain to them what the recruiting process means, what it looks like. Something as simple as these players going, hey, I've got a school contacting me. I don't know what to ask them. What questions should I ask? So they're all sitting there listening to me, and I'm just saying, ask them, what is a typical day like? What does a scholarship entail? How do you see me playing in your system? Just things that, you kind of, as a kid, especially from a different country who's not confident in your English, you're sitting there just like frozen. When a college coach hits you up, you kind of don't know what to do. So we had a lot of time to just really spend with the players and continue to build those relationships. And but also we spent a ton of time with staffs. We were able to connect players and coaches through Zoom meetings, and just kind of recruit virtually. Obviously, there was nothing to watch, so from the evaluation standpoint, that's tough. You pivot from watching basketball live and being able to evaluate players to now you're doing it from film, which a lot of people are not big fans of. It's definitely, I would so much rather be there in person, being able to size up a player and really see the emotion and see her reaction and analyze her and everything she's doing to give myself a better evaluation. So a lot of highlight films and watching on films, and but we became really important because the coaches couldn't go out either. So they really had to rely on recruiting services like us to help give them leads into players, to help point them in the right direction. And so it was just different. It didn't exactly like nothing stopped. It just was different. So now we're here and we're still doing a lot of the same stuff. Thankfully, it's been hit or miss. There's been games going on we're able to watch online, and we're able to continue to watch games internationally. But the big thing will be hopefully being able to get over there late spring, definitely in the summertime, and just being able to do it on the ground, because it's that much better. But I do have a partner in Barcelona who, his name's Danny, who does a phenomenal job, and he's able to be on the ground there too, which really helps me. Yeah.
Wow. I'm like learning so much. Things that I knew from like the front end, but just the back end, and also too, just like all of the different important, like, I was just thinking, like, did I even ask, like, when I was being recruited, like, how I would fit into their system? Like, did I even ask one of those questions?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, wow, like, I don't even remember. Like, I just remember being so nervous, and like, I spoke their language. So, wow, like, I just, what you guys offer and everything like that, is just super cool. And I've really enjoyed, this conversation for sure. To just kind of transition then into like the analyst side of things. And, once again, like kind of, I joked about it earlier with that breaking news and things like that. And clearly you have a great knowledge of the game and a passion for, you know, the information and kind of like the conversations we've had is just like bringing that hype to women's basketball, bringing that hype to women's sports. I think it's been a season of that for sure, especially with like viewership going up in the WNBA and us having access to a lot more games, and the way that they've been taking stands just for social justice and things like that. Their voices are heard and echoed way louder than what it was, you know, when I was growing up and Chicago Sky came to Chicago, and I remember like going and stuff like that. But kind of like, how did you really get, you know, that involved into, you know, the NCAA and the WNBA and the analyst side of things?
You know, when I was in that weird year in Arizona, and I like wasn't making anything, and I was just barely starting this business, and I was coaching and making like $300 a month. I you know, you're always in this, I'm always in this state of what else can I do? What else can I do to push myself? You know, what can I do to push the envelope here? And I had always, prior to that point, I had a little bit of experience doing some color commentary. I had done a couple games at Ball State following the year I left, and which was really cool. And I'd worked in the Mountain West and done a few of those games. So really like smaller level stuff, but I loved the media side of it. I love talking. Obviously, you can tell I love talking. I love talking about hoops and analyzing the game. And so one night I'm laying there, and I don't even know, I stumbled upon this I guess it must have been Twitter, this platform. It was called Hero Sports. And I don't even know. It was late at night, and I just happened to send him an email, and I said, hey, like, I don't really even know much about what you do, but if you ever want to cover women's basketball or need someone to help you cover women's basketball, like, let me know. Keep in mind, I do not have a journalism degree. my degree is in communications. So I just kind of was just throwing darts, you know, trying to find my place in this world, and didn't hear back. And literally it was right before the NCAA tournament, I think now it's like all the years blend together. It must have been 2017, maybe 2017. They emailed me back, and I said, hey, we see your resume. Like, would you be interested in maybe just covering the NCAA tournament? Okay. So we had a conversation, and basically they brought me on. They put me onto WordPress, which I was like, I have no idea what this is. And they're like, type like you are breaking down the game as a former player, as a former coach. Tell us what you see. Just And I just literally, like, once again, thrown into the fire, just threw me in the fire. And I had a really cool group of editors and a really cool team there that just embraced me as who I was, as a coach, as a player who had this unique perspective, and just kind of took me under their wing, and over time helped me understand, writing and how it works and all that sort of stuff. So it started with that from a writing perspective, and then it expanded into Twitter, and then it expanded into Winsider, which is the current outlet that I'm really involved with the most. And we have a podcast right now. And that at the time, they found me pretty quickly, and just liked my voice, I guess. And they liked my perspective. So they wanted to bring me on the team as kind of a podcast host. And so I just kind of dove in, and I was writing a little bit, and then I was doing this podcast, and then I started just talking about it on Twitter, and it's evolved over time. I mean, the Winsider has grown tremendously. R.A. Schwartz is one of the founders of it, and it's the steps that it's made in the last 3 or 4 years have been a lot of fun to be a part of. The podcast and some of the former players and current players and coaches we've been able to have on has been so much fun. We just surpassed our 200th episode, which was awesome. And then the breaking news thing, I mean, that's obviously, that's evolved into a whole other thing, but I don't really know how that happened. It just 3 years ago, I got tipped off to a move that a team was making. I kind of went to the Woj's Twitter page and kind of was like, how do they do this? Like, I have this information, but I want to get it out there. At that time, there was really no breaking news in the WNBA. You obviously had news, and you had ESPN, and you had the Associated Press and things but to do it in a way which the men were doing it, right, where you had leaking information to these media members, and then it's being put out there, and the fans just go wild. I just started doing it, and I was able to do it because of my background. I had a lot of connections in the league at that time, whether it was players, whether it was coaches, whether it was agents. I just have been around this game my whole life. So now here we are. I guess it's 3 or 4 years later, and the expectation is, as high as it's ever been, and the hype and the excitement around free agency and the WNBA is as high as it's ever been. Things that weren't necessarily talked about on a grand scale, even 5 years ago, are really sought after now. And I think for me, I have a lot of respect, for the reporters, the journalists, the people who cover women's basketball in general. I don't act like I am an expert in that. I'm not. This is a whole other element. This is a whole other animal to this that I'm still learning every single day how that works. But at the heart of it, as a former player, former coach, I see the need for it. You see different outlets creating women's basketball, offshoots of it, whether it be Slam, Bleacher Report, whatever it might be. You're seeing major outlets. The Athletic came out with a WNBA aspect of what they do. And so now you're seeing it grow. The coverage of the game is growing. The interest in the game is as high as it's ever been. And that has to really be attacked at all angles. That doesn't just happen because of the product on the floor. Of course, I think it's great, but it has to be attacked at through the media perspective too. And I think, look what the men do. Look at the NBA. They love being on Twitter. They love the Woj bombs. People love the drama of it. They love the excitement. The fans get so happy, and people want to be a part of that excitement. So if we can start to emulate that, and we can start to give these women the hype, the attention, the buildup that they deserve, then it's just going to keep growing, and it's going to pull in a lot of those fans, from other sports that are, man, what's going on over here? This is cool. I want to be a part of this, and I think that's what we're doing. I'm trying to make it as exciting as I can in my own little my own little aspect of it, but we still have a ways to go, and that's okay.
Yeah, to just think like when you said like those Woj bombs and stuff like that, like that's really like people like their phones go off. You get notifications because of those. Like it is next level, like the news, especially for people that, you know, are in sports and even just, you know, the fans. It's like people take that personally. And I think I never, you know, just being like in my early 20s and being able to look through my Instagram feed and see like where Nneka Ogwumike is, watch her at Stanford, and like is Candace Parker like, you know, gonna stay at LA, like, which like, yeah, obviously, but just those things of like having those insiders. And then not only that, but just those like the ESPNW and Slam and those upcoming players. And I feel like you're building relationships and you're having that access to them. Because I never like was really into the NBA. I like watched college players and I was like, I'm not going to be able to dunk, so I don't really care for the men's game. You know, these women are who I look up to, and it's been so cool just to really have that access. And I was like so giddy, like, oh my gosh, like she has all this breaking news. Like I can't ask her like any insider things, but like it's just so cool because I just, you know, I never thought that would be something or something that was needed on the women's side, but it's been super awesome to have that on my feed and to know those things and just the access to those trades, because it's like I get excited having to even like I've like played with some of the girls that are now starting to be rookies or just finish their rookie seasons. And one of my best friends, Kathleen Doyle, like I brought her on the show, and
she's a good player.
Just how all of that. Yeah, she is. Yeah, I love her. But just being able to talk to her and experience and yeah, it's super cool for sure. The access to have to them. But yeah, so just kind of thinking future and reflection. I feel like it's something that you definitely probably do a lot. But what kind of really do you see like women in the sports industry really kind of, you know, shattering those glass ceilings and stuff like that? But what are your hopes for women in sports and, you know, the exposure to just not only, you know, the WNBA and players as like you know, playing professionally and making money, but also from the aspect of, you know, having careers and being able to do whatever they want, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, there's no limit. And women are so powerful and so strong and so brilliant, and just I'm constantly amazed, you know, by some of the just phenomenal women that I come across and I learn from. And I think there is no ceiling. And I think every day I have a really strong servant mentality to the way I approach life. I everything I do is to help this game grow in one way or another, you know, and so I think, man, it's tough. There's a lot. I'm trying to pack this into a few sentences here, but I mean, there is no ceiling. You know, we're seeing the voices of the women in a lot of these leagues really just breaking down walls, breaking down barriers, demanding, you know, everything else that they get on the other side. And why not? You know, why can't we be talking about huge paychecks and, you know, business deals and sponsorships and phenomenal coaches, you know, strong women coaches leading, you know, college programs, high school programs, in the WNBA, you know, Fortune 500 companies. There's no limit. There's no limit. Women are phenomenal. Women are powerful. Women are incredible. We all need to support each other. We all need to be learning from each other. We all need to be uplifting one another. And that's kind of the approach that I know I personally want to take. I have my experiences, I have my resources, and I'm constantly trying to figure out how can I use my platform to push the envelope to what I feel like women deserve and to give them that exposure to push the boundary even more. We should never be satisfied. I don't know one woman who is satisfied. And it's really cool to be a part of this movement now where women are really pushing the grounds more than ever. It's fun to be a part of, and even on my small little scale, and it's just fun. It's fun, and it's an exciting time. I love the voices. I love the platforms. I love the change that's being had. We need to keep working towards that.
Rachel, you are amazing. You are all things women in sports, and why I love having these conversations and getting outside of my own personal comfort zone. I thank you so much for just being on here and sharing your heart and your passions and all things everything. Because the sky's the limit. But yeah, thank you so much for being on tonight, and I wish you the best. Can't wait for the more breaking news. Everyone go follow Rachel on Twitter.
I will do everybody. I promise you, I'll do my best.
Yes, and yeah, for sure. Check it out. WNBA season, free trade, everything's happening. It's important. But yeah, thank you.
Yep. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yep.